Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Defion Productions podcast, episode number 92. I'm your host, the hardest working nobody in Bitcoin, Don. We got a lot to talk about today in the crypto space, and we have a special guest today. We teased it on our social medias. We're gonna have a conversation today with a lifelong friend of mine. He does own some crypto. So he does have a little bit of crypto, but he's not really a crypto or Bitcoin guy. So it'll be an interesting conversation. This is also the first time he's ever been on camera on a podcast. So a lot of firsts today. We will start with the charts first, where we always do. Take a look at the Bitcoin markets. We got some pumping going on today. Bitcoin sitting currently at 109,693, total market cap of 2.18 trillion. We've been in a range of about as low as about 103.9, and we did touch 110. I saw earlier 110,100 earlier. So we've been in that range between 103 and 110, still trying to break past that illustrious 112 to break another all-time high. Maybe it happens on this holiday weekend. Who knows? Maybe we got to wait until after the holiday. Ethereum sitting at 2,586 with a market cap total of 312 billion. Going a little bit down the line, XRP $2.27, Solana $1.51. I'm sorry, $151, and everyone's favorite shitcoin, you got Pi sitting at 49 cents, under that 50-cent mark. Total market cap of crypto sitting at 3.27 trillion. We've been in a range for the total market cap of crypto. We've been in that 3.2 to 3.33 range, and we're actually sitting right smack dab in the middle, which ironically, we got our fear and greed index sitting smack dab in the middle at 50 at neutral. So, we've had a lot of macro events going on the last couple of months that have caused the price to move around. But when you zoom out and you take a look at the charts, we really are in just a range basically between 100 and 112 for the past couple of months, outside of that Liberation Day stuff that we had where all markets, traditional markets and crypto markets, went crazy haywire. Let's introduce our guest here. Let's bring him in onto the camera, and he can say hi to the folks that are watching live here or watching on playback. This is Mike Campana. This is a friend of mine of over 40 years. Again, like I said, this is the first time he's ever been live on a podcast. He actually is one of the few people in the area that actually listened to me and did buy some Bitcoin and crypto back in the day. I actually haven't talked to him even off camera too much about it lately, so I don't know what his positioning is, if he still even owns it. He may have sold it. I don't know what, we don't talk about how much we have, but we can kind of ask him if he has any coins, any Bitcoin or any other coins. We can kind of talk about that. But how you feel, Mike? How does this feel to be on camera and live?
There's one word to describe this experience walking into the studio today: epic.
Yes, this is an epic podcast. We can kind of start right there with your Bitcoin and crypto holdings. I know you had some. I don't know what if you sold out of it or if you still.
No, I still got it. It was more of a fear of missing out type thing, because like seeing that you and other people talk about it all the time, I'm like, if they really are right about this, I better have something in this. So as it stands right now, I own about.
Don't tell. You have to tell the numbers.
Well,
we
I don't have to tell them. No, okay.
Just like which ones.
I just put a little bit of money every week into it. I kind of like even out my account. Like if my account's like at an odd number of dollars, I'll like kind of like round up and buy like that, like $15 worth this week or $20 another week.
We kind of refer to that as dollar cost averaging. So that's kind of what you're doing. It's good strategy. And it's actually a good lesson for others too. Like you said, like even getting a little bit and starting with a little bit, like that's what you got to do sometimes. Just dip your toes in the water, see how it feels, experience owning this different asset class, and just, see how that experience kind of goes out for you. And I'm glad you bought it when you did. I'm glad you held on, you haven't sold. So that's pretty cool. Before we get rolling and start talking, the stories that we have or anything else, anything, this opportunity to be on a podcast like this, is there any questions that you have that you would ask on behalf of somebody that doesn't have a lot of Bitcoin experience, that you would ask someone, or anything you could think of to get things kind of rolling?
I guess I just want to know, like, I have my personal Bitcoin is on the Gemini's
Yep.
site. So it's
Exchange.
like, so say at some point I want to take money out. How does all this work? Like taxes and
Very good question.
to access that.
Yes,
money.
very good question. So we'll start with the very basic. You have it on Gemini, which is a centralized exchange. So what centralized exchange means is you're using a custodian. Gemini is custodying your Bitcoin. So Gemini has your assets. You have the public keys to that those assets. So if you wanted to send somebody some Bitcoin, you could do that with the public keys. Gemini has your private keys, which means that technically Gemini owns the Bitcoin. You have a paper contract on the Bitcoin that they have. So it would be the same thing as if you owned Apple stock, or if you just wanted to take money out of the bank. You basically just go put a withdrawal in and they sell the assets onto the market, and then whatever the US dollar value of those assets are, they deposit into your checking or savings account, whatever you have with that Gemini account. I'm assuming it's probably a checking account. So if you went on Gemini today and let's say you sold $100 of Bitcoin, you wanted to get $100 US cash, you go sell. You'd sell $100 worth of Bitcoin. There's a fee usually typically associated with it. It's like 1% that they make on both ends and a spread. So you'd probably get back like $99. So let's just say for the sake of math, you sold $105 worth to get your $100 back with a little bit of change. You hit the sell button. Gemini sells your $100 of Bitcoin, and then there's a pending transaction to your bank account of $100. And with Gemini, because I've done it before, basically the next day you have $100 sitting in your checking account. It's that easy. It's that simple. But there's a difference between holding your Bitcoin on a centralized exchange and holding your Bitcoin in self-custody. And we talk a lot about that on this podcast. And that's actually a good question they asked, good segue. Because Rich, you've been in on a lot of these conversations that we had on this podcast recently. They had a really good Spaces this week. It was a debate on self-custody versus non-self-custody. And they were talking about the advantages of doing self-custody, and also how us as Bitcoiners, which you've heard me actually argue, us as Bitcoiners make the mistake sometimes of promoting self-custody so much that we're telling somebody like Mike, who just asked the very basic, very good question that somebody would ask about digital assets. Hey, if I sell my assets on Gemini, what happens? That would not be a person that'd be a great candidate to get into self-custody on day one. Right? They're not even sure how the centralized exchange works. So trying to get them to understand self-custody, protecting your seed phrases, and if you lose it, you lose your assets. Like, that's a huge amount of responsibility.
Yeah, I would be like, that would be my problem. I'd be so freaking scared of losing my my stuff.
Yeah, and again, I'm a guy who's had my Bitcoin, significant portion of my net worth in self-custody since 2016. But I've also been in Bitcoin since 2013, and I had it on Coinbase when I first started for the first couple of years. It took me a while to even understand how self-custody worked, how to protect my seed phrase, all that. It took years, and that was back when there wasn't a lot of information. But there was a really, really good debate this week. Gary Cardone, Joe Carlesi, Simon Dixon, Dustin Stockton, they had a Spaces, and it was on a YouTube channel, debating on, is it appropriate to tell newbies to self-custody? And I'm actually on the side, and when we started this podcast, Rich, you can attest to this. I was on the everybody needs a self-custody. The whole reason for this thing is self-sovereignty and all that. But like, there really is a really good argument for people just to do what Mike's doing. Mike has Bitcoin and he has it on Gemini. He goes to bed knowing that Gemini is a good actor, and Gemini is going to have if he sells $100 worth, he's probably going to get $100 worth back. So there's a good argument to just start with Gemini, start with Coinbase, and kind of just go from there. And then as you go along your journey of Bitcoin, learn about self-custody, and then maybe eventually do that. When I say self-custody, Mike, what does that even mean to you? Do you even understand what that is, or any how that works?
Not really.
Exactly. That's the perfect answer that I'm looking for. That self-custody is just not the right route for new people. You should definitely, if you want, because we also, when I first started in this, Venmo, Cash App, Robinhood did not have crypto on it. You could not buy them. Then Robinhood got it, but it was it was basically the same way as you buy stock. When you buy stock on Robinhood, you're basically you don't own the stock. Robinhood owns the stock. You own a USD value of that stock, and they just credit your account with the amount of US dollar value is. And then they eventually changed it where you can actually have a wallet. And they did that with Venmo, and they did that with Cash App, where you can actually on Venmo, Cash App, and Robinhood buy it the same way you can buy it on Gemini and Coinbase and send the Bitcoin, not send the dollars. Because before, if you bought Bitcoin on Robinhood and you wanted to put it onto Coinbase, you had to actually sell your Bitcoin on Robinhood, take the dollars out into your checking account, and then go to Coinbase or Gemini and buy it again. Whereas now, if you want to send your Bitcoin from Robinhood or Coinbase, or I'm sorry, or Cash App or Venmo to Coinbase, you just basically get your address for the one, address for the other, and send without having to worry about selling fees on this side and buying fees on this side. You're basically just transporting it back and forth. Again, that's probably something else you may not even have realized, but for new people, that stuff is kind of important because it makes the onboarding very easy. If you're having a conversation with somebody and you're like, oh, I have Cash App and I own some Bitcoin on Cash App, and you're like, hey, have you ever had Coinbase or Gemini? And they're like, what is that? And you're like, oh, you could have it over here. It makes it much easier now for them to go sign up on Coinbase or Gemini, get a wallet, and then just transfer instead of signing up, selling, and then having to rebuy it over here. And it's just a pain in the ass. It's just, there's a lot more fluidity now than there was before.
A couple questions then.
Yeah.
So when I look at self-custody, it's the same reason that like when I don't run my own investments because I know I'm not qualified to do it. I know I'm not focused. I'm going to miss out on things. I'm going to make stupid mistakes. So yeah, I'm paying for a service essentially. One way or the other, I'm paying for that service. So same way, like if you're not going to be able to do all this stuff, then you shouldn't do self-custody because you're going to probably screw it up. Like, you know, twice a year I have to order a new credit card for my wife because she loses like the one in the couch, or she doesn't know where she left it or whatever it is. So it's like I would not want her to be doing self-custody because she would have no idea what the password was, and we would have that would be the crypto that's floating around that no one's ever going to find again because we won't remember.
Do you know the number of Bitcoin that's estimated to be lost because of self-custody?
I think I remember a percentage. I think you said something like 8% is.
There's 21 million of Bitcoin that there ever will be, and there's somewhere between 4 and 5 million that are considered to be lost. Yeah. So there's actually, when you really think about it, about 16 million that we're really working with because of the 4 to 5 million that have been lost because of people losing their seed phrases. Because in the early days, before the exchanges, that's all that there really was. Right. You had it on a hard drive, and if you lost the hard drive or threw it out, Bitcoin was gone.
Or it got corrupted.
The first 4 years of Bitcoin up until 2013, it was worth less than a penny for most of that time. So people had thousands or tens of thousands of Bitcoin on their hard drive, and they got a new computer, and they're like, well, I got $10 worth of Bitcoin on I'm just going to toss it out. There's a big story, and he's still, like, even 7 or 8 years later, he still goes to the garbage dump looking for it. He threw out a hard drive with like 50 or 60,000 Bitcoin on it. It's just like insane amounts of money and wealth that were just lost.
That's crazy.
But yeah, I mean that's you did it. I saw before we were filming a friend of yours. If you wanna shout her out or whatever question she had, if you want to talk about what.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Christy, asked about XRP. What was going on with that? She must be an XRP investor.
Yes, and she must not watch our podcast if she's asking that question, which is fine. Yeah. I'm okay with that. It's good to have new eyes in here. XRP is a altcoin. Okay, so you have Bitcoin, the first coin, the coin that you can truly own, the thing that started all of this off, the true decentralized token. Everything else is trying to copy what Bitcoin is, and everything else has some sort of centralized player or players that control the protocol, which means that things can change without anyone's permission except for the people that run it. You can't do that with Bitcoin. So XRP is one of those tokens that is tied to Ripple Labs, and Bitcoin has 21 million. XRP has a market cap, a total market supply of 100 billion. So you have 21 million with Bitcoin, XRP you have 100 billion, which is why Bitcoin, it isn't the only reason why, one of many reasons why you have a Bitcoin sitting at almost 110,000 and XRP sitting at $2.27. Here's the thing with XRP. Bitcoin, you want to be your store of value. And we don't have enough time in this podcast to talk about peer-to-peer store of value and that whole argument of all that stuff and people wanting Bitcoin to be money and transacting it and buying things with Bitcoin. You want to store your value in something that has value, that will hold value. And that's what Bitcoin has been and turned into. All of these other coins, you're not getting that with. And that's why, Christy, you said her name is? Yeah. That's why your friend Christy's even asking that question. If you owned XRP in 2018, okay, we're in 2025, so this is 7.5 years ago. If you owned XRP in 2018, XRP was sitting at almost exactly what it's sitting at what I'm looking at my screen right now, around $2.50. So you hold that coin for 7.5 years and you make nothing. You actually lose because inflation is eroding away your buying power. So you have this token that's not storing you any value, XRP, the whole thing with XRP was it's going to replace the SWIFT system. It's behind the scenes of the banks. When your bank transacts with another bank, there's a system called SWIFT that does all those transactions behind the scenes. When M&T Bank and Bank of America or Evans Bank, all these banks, when they transact, there's a system behind the scenes that settles all the transactions. The SWIFT system is what kind of does that. What the XRP people want you to believe is XRP is going to replace the SWIFT system and be the token that does all that stuff and do it faster. They were saying that in 2016 because I've been around since 2013. So I was around for that argument. So we've gone a couple of cycles and it hasn't happened. And then the SEC brought a lawsuit against them and it just really kind of went away in the last 6 to 12 months. And XRP is still sitting at a $2.28 price point. XRP is what we call a shitcoin. So if you're looking to continue to earn buying power. And again, I know it's hard for people because you look at Bitcoin's price and you're like, well, I can't buy one Bitcoin for 110,000. Do you own one whole Bitcoin?
No.
You own parts of a Bitcoin. So you don't have to own one whole Bitcoin. You don't need $110,000 to buy Bitcoin today. You can buy Bitcoin at $15 at a time, $20 at a time, like you said. So you're putting your money $2 at a time in this token that's doing nothing for the last 8 years. The same point that XRP was $2.28 in 2017 or 2018, Bitcoin was $1,000. So you're talking about 110x and something that hasn't done anything. Now, you're not going to probably get another 110x from Bitcoin in the next 8 years, realistically, no. But you're going to continue to increase buying power in something like Bitcoin, where XRP has Brad Garlinghouse, Chris Larson, Ripple Labs, all these things behind the scenes. And another example would be something like Ethereum. Like Ethereum, the first time Bitcoin hit 100,000, Ethereum was almost at 4,000, and here Bitcoin's sitting at 109, and Ethereum's at 2,500. Ethereum suffers from the same sort of problem. They have Vitalik Buterin and the Ethereum Foundation that pull all the strings. So Bitcoin was created to be something different than the traditional finance system. The traditional finance system, your banks, they pull all the strings. We have no power. You go to the bank, you put your money in the bank, they control everything. We're at the mercy of all that. Bitcoin was created to be something different, for us to take control of our money, self-sovereignty, be self-sovereign individuals. That's why Bitcoin is created. Ethereum, XRP, all these other coins, were trying to ride off of Bitcoin's coattails and be, the next Bitcoin, it's going to go up to 1,000, 2,000, make all this money. But the problem that they never solved for was they made those coins be the same thing that the traditional system already is, and have people that control the strings in those coins like people control the traditional system. That's the problem with XRP. XRP is nothing different than the traditional system. It's basically just another drummed up, shitty version of the traditional system that we already have, with 100 billion tokens instead of infinite money supply that the dollar is.
A good comparison would be, for people that don't know, would probably be to like sports cards, like how they produced mad cards back in the late 80s, early 90s.
XRP is 90s Donruss.
Yeah,
Bitcoin is 52 tops.
See, now,
yes.
For someone that likes sports cards, that's a good
good analogy. Yeah, that's actually really good that you brought that up. Yeah, XRP would be something like 1990 Donruss or 1990 tops that was completely overproduced trash. It has some value. It's not worth zero. If you get the right card, it has a little bit of money. But the Bitcoin is like a 52 mantle, like PSA 9.
See, that makes it look at it totally differently.
Yeah.
If you can compare it to something else in your life, similar to that.
For Never Podcasting, that was a very good analogy you bring in. That was very, very good. Something that because I'm thinking the way that I think, and just a normal thinking non-Bitcoin guy coming in and just being like, hey, let's dumb this down a little bit. And let's get it so people.
See, honestly, I think when I like rip you like jokingly on your thing, it's because I don't understand. You're writing all this stuff on there, and it's like I don't understand this language, and I doubt anybody else does.
We're going to clip what you just said and put it into something when I make my shorts, so that'll be something that I'll put out for the people so they'll understand. But like in all seriousness, that was a really good analogy, and I'm disappointed I never really thought of that. But yeah, if you think about like sports cards, there are so many different companies of sports cards, so many different brands of sports cards, so many different, all these different options that you have. But you want 52 tops for baseball, you want 86 Fleer for basketball, you want 79 tops Wayne Gretzky for hockey. Like, you want those because those are super rare and different than everything else. So when people are like, oh, what do you think about XRP? Or, oh, what do you think about Fartcoin? Or like, oh, what do you think about Solana? It's like, yeah, it's a crypto coin. It's a cryptocurrency, but you're comparing 52 Tops baseball with 1990 Donruss. Yes, they're baseball cards, but in no way, shape, or form are any of the, like we say, tokenomics, but none of the behind the scenes scarcity models of these are anywhere near alike. And that's what makes one have so much value, and one, when you look at it and you're like, I'm going to put this as spokes in my bike, where the other one you're going to put in a case and you're going to hold on to like it's generational wealth. That's the big difference. Yeah, that was really good. That was really good, Rich, huh?
That was really good.
And that's why we pay him the big bucks.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I think it's, and I think we've talked about it before. I think as I've started to learn thing, I always try to find out like ways of comparing it too. Like I'm trying to like, I remember one of the first dumb questions I asked was trying to like, well, what about gold? Like, I kind of fell for it. And
yeah.
We had a whole conversation. But we talked about art and real estate and all these ways of looking at it. But the baseball card's another thing too. And it's funny. Like I just said to somebody, there's that it's gone now. But remember that bulletin, that billboard that was on the 190 on the way here that said something like, your parents, like your in-laws are not your invest. Like,
oh yeah. I
don't remember what it said.
I think it was Charles Schwab, but yeah, I know.
But it was like you've got to have a plan, and I think that's what Bitcoin is, a plan. If you know what you're doing, you put your time into it, it's the plan.
It's an escape valve for middle class people like us that are not going to be saved by the traditional system of finance. That's basically what it is, and it's elaborate, like Mike just pointed out. In some cases, to try to conceptualize, but sometimes you just got to make it super easy, and just bring it back to like basic stuff that people can understand. We had a big, well, I won't say big, but we had a jobs number today that's kind of important because it affects markets. The U.S. economy added 147,000 jobs in June, above the expectations of 111,000. Unemployment fell to 4.1%, below expectations of 4.3%. The May jobs number was revised up from 139,000 to 140,000. The headline numbers continue to crush expectations. Going down a little further, this was a very hot jobs report with yields soaring now. While Trump will applaud the numbers, it gives Powell more of a reason not to cut rates. This was the last jobs report before the July Fed meeting. We talk a lot of traditional stuff in here, so that's why we're kind of bringing this up. Trump really wants Powell to cut rates, and a hot report like this, $2 at a time in this token. Although it's really good for the administration, it's good for the economy, it's not good for his objective to get Powell to lower rates. This is definitely going to probably throw a wrench in Powell doing so in July. I was listening to it live when they got released this morning, and it was like 90-something% that we were going to get a rate cut definitely in September, and it went down to 70% in like seconds. So the rate cut percentages continue to go down because the economy is still running hot, inflation going down. All these reasons are just make it very difficult for Powell to cut. And obviously, when he starts cutting and they start printing, then asset prices will really start to explode, and we're still going to have a little bit of a pause on that. Next story from Paul Barron. Banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America are now in official panic mode, as 89% of Gen Z and millennials report that they will leave their banks for crypto and DeFi platforms offering yield, tokenized stocks, and Web3. That's a good place to kind of have a conversation about, because everybody in this room here is not a millennial. We're all right above being millennials. We're in that next batch of ages. But the cold hard facts are that millennial generation is no longer looking to the stock market. They're looking to crypto, DeFi, tokenized stocks. We're going to see a shift for sure in the next 10 to 15 years, I would say, as the boomers start to age out, per se. I don't know how to say that without being morbid, but as the boomers move on to that next phase of whatever you want to call that, and the millennials become the older generation, it's going to be fascinating to see how the stock market reacts. And I think that there's a lot of under anticipating of that going on in Wall Street. Maybe behind the scenes they're recognizing it, and maybe that's why as we talk this out, maybe that's why the Trump administration and the people involved in the Trump administration have been so friendly towards crypto. Maybe they're recognizing this shift and they're kind of moving things towards the Web3 and the crypto to try to move some of those assets that are in equities into the crypto sphere and get the United States as involved as possible. So we're ready for that change.
And I think younger people in our generation, I'd say younger, the younger, not the millennials generation, younger than millennials, that we want to, their politicians we don't want them to feel like they're out of touch with what's going on. So I think the fact that Trump was smart to say, this is a thing that's out there, and I get it. Even though I'm older, I get this is a new strategy for people, and we agree with you. So whether he's true to his word and some of the stupid stuff that he's done with it is annoying, but I think he got people to say, this guy's paying attention that there's new trends in finance, so to speak.
Let me ask Mike a question, because I think this could be pretty valuable.
Sure.
And you might have to just guess this, because I'm going to assume you're not having these conversations often at work. But if you just, as a guy that's worked at your job, if you want to tell where you work, it's fine.
I work at Seneca Niagara Casino as a table games dealer.
And you've been there for how long?
21 years.
So if you were to guess, because it's probably going to be a guess, I know you well enough to know you're not having these conversations at the water cooler.
No.
But if you were to guess, how many of your coworkers would you say are actively, outside of just maybe having a work 401k that they put money into, what percentage of your work colleagues would you say are actively saving for retirement? If you had to throw a number on it, percentage wise.
More than you think. People don't talk about it.
Okay.
But I know
Talking.
recently I had some conversations when I was having some concerns myself about my own retirement, and I just brought it up to a couple people I know, and they were telling me what they were doing, and I was blown away that they were way ahead of where I'm at, for sure.
Yeah, and that's another point that you brought up too. People aren't comfortable having these financial conversations, and it should be more of a comfortable thing to have a conversation with people about. Not necessarily, hey, I have X amount of dollars in my 401k, or I have X amount of dollars in wherever the case may be. I'm not saying that, but just strategy wise, we talk sports strategy and we don't think that's weird. And we talk about all these other life sort of strategies, and we never sit down and just say, hey, what are you thinking about 10, 15 years from now? And how are you planning for that today? That's a weird conversation as society, and it shouldn't be.
I got something to say about this. I think about this kind of stuff all the time, but the amount of hours I spend every day arguing and discussing stuff like fantasy football, for example, where you're doing this, and at the end of the day, you're going to get maybe $500 out of this thing. When why aren't we having these conversations about bigger amounts of money?
That's the point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. If you look at your life, how many people do you know are like me and have these types of open conversations? There's not really many.
No.
Because I don't really have many in my life. I'm the outcast when it comes to this stuff. But it's kind of scary, because if it's happening on such a mass level, it's got to be because we're being indoctrinated to feel that that's the right way to do things. Otherwise, we would be doing it, right? Something in society is making it that we feel like saying that or talking about that is It's I guess it's a bad example. And I'll just say talking politics, because everybody talks politics now. But it's usually you say, don't talk religion, don't talk politics, you're going to get yourself in trouble. But I would say politics is kind of talked about a lot now. I would say don't talk religion, don't talk finance, because people just don't talk finance. And I do it for a living, and it's difficult to get people to talk about their finances, even in a setting where it's supposed to be appropriate, and to peel back the layers. People are just not comfortable.
You know what I think part of it is it's scary to talk about it, because if you really break it down, I spend a lot of money on wasteful things in life, like energy drinks, experience, going to Bills games, WWE events, T-shirts, clothing, stuff I don't really need in life. I blow a lot of money that I could have been putting into Bitcoin, crypto, even my 401k.
This is a good reason why I had you on the podcast today. I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to talk about that, because there's a happy medium between me and you, because I agree with what you said. However, there is a fine line between how I live my life and how you live your life,
Yeah.
because we're both on opposite ends of the spectrum. And I don't think either way is completely healthy. Somewhere in the middle is a morph between how me and you view things that's much more healthy, right? Because I do think like you should enjoy life. You should be buying experiences. You should be doing things that you can remember. And I definitely don't do enough of that for sure. And I'll admit that. But on the flip side of that, you also can't spend all of your money on those experiences and things, because then at the end of the day, you don't have anything to save for later. So I think somewhere in the middle of where you're at and I'm at is where we should both be. And I think that's kind of like what we're both.
You know, my problem is like, here's a story. I don't know if you've ever told on your podcast, but our third friend, Big Joe Marks, passed away unexpectedly at the age of 33 years old.
2 days ago was the 13-year anniversary.
On July 1st, 2012. And that's when like me and you kind of went in total different directions in a way, where like you said, I got to take care of my finances, where I was like, I have to start doing more stuff and getting out there. And like before that, I didn't leave Niagara Falls much. I didn't take vacations. And so like I just went crazy on that end of the spectrum. You went crazy more on like saving and worrying about
Found Bitcoin
protecting your
literally
family.
A year and a half after.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, it is fascinating how like traumatic events will kind of have a different effect on two different people, and two different people that were affected by the same event.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So it is to think about like how you're on one end and I'm on the other end, and how it affected each one of us. And we can both sit here and say like somewhere in the middle of where we both went was probably where we should have both been. We both should have been somewhere in the middle of what we both decided on.
Because for me, like I went way too far in the thing that I was like one day he was there and the next day he's gone. So that's how I live my life. I'll worry about the future later. Like I got to get out there and do stuff now. So I went way too far in that direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you did. I mean,
but I have a lot of great memories. But at the end of the day, like, what are those memories going to do for me 10, 20 years from now? I mean, I'll always have the memories, but I probably could have used the extra money and sitting in my retirement fund too.
Yeah. I mean, but look at Joe. Joe saving for retirement that he never got to. So. There's an in between.
You don't know.
There's an in between. You have to enjoy life. A partner that I work with at work he says two things that he says. Number one, he says, and Rich, you might have heard him say this too. We all got 1 year left to live. We just don't know when that year starts, right? And then the other thing is, act like you're going to, or live your life like you're going to you might die today and also live to 100.
That's tough though. Because the other thing is like with inflation and all this stuff, like we're making less, and someone like me who stays at the same job just because I love what I do and everything, and I don't look to like move up or anything like that. I just love what I'm doing. But the unfortunate drawback of that is I'm kind of making less money every year.
You're making the case for Bitcoin.
Exactly.
That's why Bitcoin exists. Yes, I know.
So
100%.
So to be able to do all the things I like to do and save for retirement. And
do you know why that's happening?
No.
You don't understand why.
I do.
Okay,
Rich, you've heard me break it down so many times, but you're experiencing the debasing of the dollar. You as everybody is experiencing the debasing of the dollar. What's happening is we're printing so much money, and we saw this in steroids and the COVID effect, is that because we don't have money backed by anything. I'm sure you knew we got off gold in 1971. You know that. Because we're not backed, our dollars aren't backed by anything. The government has free will to print as many dollars as they need. So we borrow more dollars than we take in. They tax us. And I think our tax receipts are something like $5 trillion and they're spending $7. So we have a $2 trillion deficit every single year. So they continue to print more money. Baseball card analogy, okay? Let's pretend baseball cards are money. Let's pretend 1990 Donruss is money, right? So if 1990 Donruss is money and you're using 1990 Donruss as money, there's so much of it that you're going to have to inflate things to a higher. I'm gonna have to give you sets of 1990 Donruss in order to make a transaction with you. If I want to buy something for $100, I need like 10 sets of 1990 Donruss to pay you off, right?
Yep.
Now let's say that we're gonna use 1952 tops, and I'm gonna use a Mickey Mantle card now. Using a Mickey Mantle card for that same $100, I'm going to chop off a small little piece. Now, we don't actually do that, but you'd only need a small piece of that card to pay for that same amount that those sets would cost you.
Right.
So that's dollars. 1990 Donruss is the dollars that are in the economy. So what happens is the wages don't go up fast enough, which is what you're experiencing. Because the wages don't go up fast enough, the price of goods and services are going up faster than wages, which is why when you work a job for 21 years, for you making less money 20 years ago, you were living better than you're living today,
Absolutely.
making probably almost double than what you made back then, or maybe 50% more, whatever the case may be. But when you go to the grocery store and you're buying groceries, or when you go do something for your car. I mean, I can just use an example of like man-hour labors. Like I remember a time when man-hour labors for doing your car was like $35 an hour. I was getting my oil change and I saw 150. And I'm telling you that this is within the last 10 to 15 years. So if the man-hour went from 35 to 150, you're talking about a 5x in man hours. I'm not making 5x more than I was making
Me neither.
20 years ago. So wages aren't going up fast enough. We're printing, and this is why when you see me and I'm not going to pick on you, but you're here, so I can say it. Like when people are like, "Well, what do you get mad at MAGA? You get mad at Trump? You get mad at Biden?" It's like they're all doing the same thing. Nobody's changing anything. The system is set up in a certain way. You get a president for 4 years. Trump may want to do all the greatest things ever. He will never be able to do those things. He's only here for 4 years and he's one guy. The system is set up in such a way where he can have the best intentions in the world, but the money is broken. He's not going to fix it. He can't fix it. You literally can't fix it. If he were to try to fix it, here's an example. If they try to stop this Ponzi scheme that the dollar is and they stop printing, you know what happens? We default and the whole system crashes tomorrow. Now we go into a Great Depression and people are going to food banks because now the money's worth absolutely nothing. They have to keep printing more money to keep it going the way that it's going. To keep it going means they're hurting the middle class, guys like me and you. On the other end of the spectrum, guys like Elon, and again, I'm a free capitalist and I'm not against billionaires and I'm not trying to tax. There's a whole other conversation about taxing the billionaires more. But what ends up happening is the people that are at the top end of the scale, they don't feel inflation because their assets go up. Their Tesla stock goes up. Their Apple stock goes up. Me and you don't own 1 million shares of Apple. I don't own 1 million shares of Tesla. We don't have a shot. They do. That's why 20 years ago, the richest man in the world was worth about 40 or 50 billion. Now the richest man in the world is worth 300 or 400 billion. They're 5 and 6x in their shit. So inflation doesn't do shit for them. But guys like me and you that own 2 or 3 shares of something or got a couple $100,000 or less in a 401k, we're getting smoked.
Well,
So-
I mean, if you just look at the dollar, like this is the worst year for the dollar since '73, ironically, and it's it's a lot of reasons. It's the overprinting. This bill that we just passed is ridiculously over the top.
It's the Build Back Better and Inflation Reduction Act Part 2.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Different names of things that they're doing, but the spending is the
But
same.
either way, it's spending. It's too much spending, and with all the just chaos out of the White House, it's chaos. Like whether you like what he's doing or not doesn't matter. It's chaos, and it's led to insecurity in the stock market, so that's hurting the dollar. And it's also when people don't want to invest in the dollar, so investment into the dollar's down. So people are looking at, can I invest in the euro?
Put the screen up right here. It's what you're talking about.
Yeah, can I invest in the euro instead? Or like I remember going to Europe in '85 when I graduated from high school, and the dollar was worth twice as much as the pound. It's completely flip-flopped since then, and we're under the euro now. We're usually above the euro. We're under the euro now. The Canadian dollar is actually up, and it's like we're continuing to go down. So we're down. The dollar's down 10%.
13 in the last 6 months.
So I guess my article's old.
It's right up there. 13.
I mean,
the dollar's trading like a shit coin, down 13% in 6 months.
And so like who cares? So I got it. So if it's down 10%, 13%, that means just to maintain without inflation, I needed a 13% raise. I don't know anybody's got a 13% raise.
So
biggest
Mike,
raise I ever got was a 16%.
So Mike,
was a 6% raise. That
I'm
was the
glad
biggest raise I
you're
ever got.
here in this conversation because you see me post all the shit that I'm posting. You just laid out something that everybody's feeling. How do you think it would feel to explain what you just said and to be somebody that knows why it's happening, watching it happen in real time and watching it get worse. And I'm yelling to everybody of what's happening, and they're like, no MAGA. Or like I'm going to the Bills game. And I'm like, you are literally watching things just collapse on the middle class, where we have a whole generation that can't buy a house. I'm meeting with people that make $100,000 a year that can't afford to go buy a house.
Mm-hmm.
It's just wild to watch. So in 2008, the white paper was made that was written, which is the ethos of Bitcoin. Bitcoin gets released in 2009. And the whole reason it was released because of what happened in 2008 with the great financial crisis, because they saw that and they said, this is not a one-off. That is the beginning of what's going to be happening in the future. So 2008 happens, and then we see 2020, which was 2008 on steroids. 2008, they let it go to the brink, and then they saved it. 2020, they stopped it before it even got close to the brink. 2008, they needed $729 billion of a TARP plan, which people are like, oh my God, that's so much money. In 2020, we put out $10 trillion before it even got close to any sort of collapsing. They're like, we're getting this way early. Everybody's going to get money. They're going to feel great. They're going to buy baseball cards. They're going to buy Pokemon cards. They're going to go put money in their Robinhood account. Let's give them $1,400. Let's give them $2,000. Let's give the families $200. And everybody's like, this is great. This is awesome. Getting free money from the government. And then 2 years later, you're like, wait a minute. Why does my groceries cost 5 times what they costed 2 years ago? Why when I go buy lumber, I can't and you're like, wait a minute. Like, the shit isn't free. There's no free money. That's not free. They're making more of it. So now the money that you go to the market with is buying less. It still says $100 on your $100 bill. It's not $100, but the $100 doesn't buy the same shit that it bought even 5 years ago. I mean, if you think back to 2019, things that you could buy in 2019, you're not getting anywhere close to that today.
Dude, you can even look at a Buffalo Bills games, the amount of year after year after year just keeps
absolutely
going up and up. And
absolutely.
Up. I used to go to every game of the year, buy them on the secondary market, $30 a game and everything. Now $200 a game to go to a sporting event.
The money's broken, Mike. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. That's the whole point of this podcast. This is why I do what I do. This is my passion that I have for this, because I know what the problem is and I know what the solution is. And the scariest part about all of this is knowing that most people will not accept the solution. Most people are just going to get lost. It's like Noah's Ark. Everybody ain't coming on the Ark. And it's not because we're not inviting them. They're just not going to come on the Ark.
But my biggest question to you when I criticize it all the time is, what can I only make so much money every week, and that money's going to my bills and my entertainment. There's nothing left over to put into this. And with the price of Bitcoin now, it's almost like too late.
We showed a chart a couple of podcasts ago. It was from 2018 to the present, and it was $50 a week. From 2018 to, I think, the beginning of 2025. The starting price was I'm not sure what the starting price was, but obviously it was at 100K Bitcoin. But 2018, the price was, depending on when they bought it, maybe 10 grand. So you're talking about a 10X of the price. And they did $50 every single week from 2018 to 2025. That's 7 years. They invested $19,000 total for 7.5 years, whatever it was. And they had accumulated $109,000 worth of Bitcoin. Yeah. Because Bitcoin has a rate of return over a long term. It's got the gyrations and stuff, but it's got a rate of return over the long term that you're going to beat anything else that you're putting your money in. The best investment for the last 10 years is Bitcoin. Nothing's beat it. The last 15 years, Bitcoin. Obviously, the beginning parts were such huge gains, but even in the last 1, 2, and 3 years, when it's still at the top. It's beating everything because Bitcoin is not correlated to a market that has a infinite supply. There's only so many. It can't be manipulated. There is nobody, like the XRP question that you asked earlier. People own XRP. They can manipulate, put coins in, take coins out, dump on the market, all kinds of crazy shit that can happen there. None of that shit can happen with Bitcoin. It's a finite supply. Eventually, and again, I even argue with fellow Bitcoiners on this. There's Bitcoiners that'll tell you Bitcoin's going to back the dollar. Bitcoin's going to be the world reserve currency. I don't necessarily subscribe to all that happening necessarily anytime soon. I know it eventually will happen. Eventually, Bitcoin's going to back whatever currency that we got at some point in time. How long it's going to take for that to happen is up in the air, because I know from being on this earth for 47 years that people are just so late and they just want to resist and they don't want to believe anything. They just want to dig their head in the sand and just believe that everything's going to be fine. The government's going to save us. MAGA's going to save us. Trump's going to save us. Or 10 years from now, somebody else will come along and they're going to save us. And they don't realize, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that think we're still on a gold standard to even start. They think money is still backed by gold. And that stopped happening 55 years ago. We haven't done that for 55 years. And people still think that that's a thing. So knowing that that exists, not even to talk about like the fact that we print all the money that we print, but what you said, people can identify with. They know that when they look at their paycheck and they're older like us, I can remember 10 years ago. My paycheck went farther. Why, when I go to the store, I can't buy anything? I'm making more money.
Yeah, exactly.
Man, when I was 20 years old, if somebody would have told me I was going to make $75,000, I'd think I was rich. That's so much money. You know what I mean? And now you're like, that ain't shit.
Yeah, exactly.
I can barely survive on that. I can't even get a house.
Exactly.
So
the problem with some of this stuff is there's some things that have happened like that aren't necessarily in like let me talk about Bills tickets or just event tickets for things in general. Going to a concert, like that hasn't kept up with inflation either. So I understand it's just greed. Like they don't right? I think a lot of it's greed. But I mean, the housing market, other things for sure. But there's certain things it's just greed. Like colleges have gotten way too expensive, and it's not necessarily because of the services. It's they're all competitive with each other now. Where it's like, well, I want a nicer dorm, or I'm going to have this, and so I got to have this building. So the college got really expensive, partially, and I think that was artificially because of marketing. Like, we need to have a better basketball team, so they got to have a better arena. So they do that. Like, but so that bothers me, because I feel like Bills tickets used to be, like there's a big soccer tournament in the country right now, and the ticket pricing is just freaking ridiculous. Like, who's going to these games? None of them sold out, and it's conceit by that organization, that FIFA that's running it. It's overpriced, and I don't know, they thought people were going to come to this, or they just figured we don't really care because we kind of know it's not going to sell out, but we're going to make money on whatever. Instead of pricing at a point that was good for families so they could go. There was the greed factor. But that's not everything. Most of it is just
broken money.
Like, so, but people try to well, it's because of the greed. So yes, there's greed. And I was going to say, I agree with you. It's not all greed. Greed's a part of it, but it's not just greed. There's also this stuff too.
Every time we see something go on in the Middle East where Israel's getting bombed or Iran's getting bombed or whoever's getting you're bombed. Watching broken money in real time. You're watching $75 million rockets getting launched and another $75 million rocket getting launched to take it out. So you're watching a $150 million firework display in the sky on just 2 rockets. You can't do that if the money's not broken, because you can print money to infinity. So if you can print money to infinity, you can print so much to have so many rockets and so many missiles, and you can fight so many wars to get more money and just keep printing more money. And it causes so many problems. Not just when you go to the grocery store, it causes conflicts. And we've seen it since the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War is what elicited us to get off the gold standard, because we were doing this shit in the late 60s and everybody else called our bluff and said, you are not backing your money that you're supposed to be backing with gold, because how are you fighting this war in Vietnam and spending all this money? It's not adding up. Give us our gold back.
Well,
and then
in God we trust and all that stuff on the dollar is like our thing. Like you're if you trust the American dollar, it's because you have faith in the American dollar and the American system. Like it's faith of the thing. But if people don't have faith in America anymore, then why do you think your dollar is going down? Because people don't have worldwide investors, local in our own country, don't have faith in what we're doing as a nation. Don't mean the political. I mean just in general what we do. And it's like, so that's. And because you just keep printing, you keep selling bombs, you keep going into wars. It's like what you're doing as a system isn't viable. Like it's not going to be viable long term. It's like the reason we laughed at Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed, because they were spending They were, as they say in Top Gun, you're cashing, your body's cashing. What is it? Cashing checks. You can't.
Mouse cash and check.
Whatever
yeah,
it is,
yeah.
like
Mouth
it's
can't
that.
cash.
That we laughed at Russia for doing it, and we're essentially doing the same thing now, and we're bankrupting our country.
Well, you know what they say that the dollar is backed by? The military-industrial complex.
Oh, for sure.
So we're about to experience the first year in history where we've spent $1 trillion on defense spending.
Yeah.
And it's under the Trump administration. And ironically enough, you know how much of an uptick it was to go from where we were to where we're going to be? $150 billion.
Yeah. Oh, what a
How much
surprise.
did Doge save?
Yeah. And I'm not even sure that those cuts actually exist.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's show this video real quick. It's 3 minutes and 58 seconds. This is Bo Hines, Trump's executive director. He's saying that the crypto industry will probably go to 15 to 20 trillion after stablecoin legislation becomes law. And they did just pass the Genius Act this week. So let's watch this video real quick. Oh, no sound? No sound on it?
Taking time out of your very busy day at the White House here at the Bitcoin conference, but to spend a few minutes with us, we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fred. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're doing all this great work for the industry. I know you guys have the stablecoin, the Genius Act teed up, ready to go. What do you think the impact of that is going to be?
It's really monumental. First and foremost, I don't think it should be lost on anybody. We haven't had bipartisan legislation move out of Senate banking and actually get passed since 2018. I think our Democratic colleagues certainly understand that the United States needs to lead the charge in terms of updating our current financial systems. I've said repeatedly throughout this conference, everything else has evolved, right? The ways in which we communicate, the technology that we use, the ways in which we move money really hasn't. And I think that's shocking to a lot of people. But what Genius does, it permits instant settlement times, more cost-effective payments, more transparency. It secures U.S. dollar global dominance for decades to come. And, this should be the least partisan piece of legislation that ever moves through Congress. So, we feel very optimistic about where things stand. I think we picked up some 15 Democrats on the cloture vote. Hopefully next week we'll get this thing passed. We'll move it to the House and put it on the president's desk to be signed. The capital injection that goes into the digital assets ecosystem as a result of stables is enormous. I think that you're looking at probably an industry going to $15-20 trillion, because what this does is it establishes really the foundation for all the exciting things that we've dreamed of. Tokenized public securities, 24/7 markets. If you want to access U.S. capital markets, you're going to have to use a dollar-backed stable. And this is what positions the United States to be the global leader. And in reality, we should be pushing this change. We should be at the forefront of adoption of digital asset financial technology and really leading the charge globally in that. It'll protect the U.S. economy. It'll certainly create innovation here in the United States, and that's something we should all be excited about.
That's great. Obviously, anything that helps the price of Bitcoin helps all of us in the Bitcoin industry.
Well, that's right. I think that too, with this capital injection, being able to move in and out of different asset classes at will, naturally, Bitcoiners will benefit from that. People will be purchasing Bitcoin in large amounts, as they should. We've talked about repeatedly that we view Bitcoin as digital gold for all the reasons that we've laid out over the course of the past week and moreover, really over the course of the past few months. It's commodity, not a security, intrinsic stored value, finite. All the things we look for on the decentralization side. David likes to say that Bitcoin has the immaculate conception. I get asked all the time too, as we set up the strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's like, how much Bitcoin do you want? And I think that's just a very silly question that journalists ask. We want as much Bitcoin as we can possibly accumulate. Now, obviously, we have to do that in these budget neutral ways. But I think that there's many creative ideas out there that we can act on.
And, one of the great opportunities, I think, especially that solves two issues. One is helps the government accumulate Bitcoin and helps Bitcoin miners establish more hash rate in the U.S. is to partner with the U.S. government using energy potentially as a way to generate Bitcoin for the strategic reserve.
No, I think that that's a phenomenal prospect that we should certainly be keen on acting on. As we flesh out these ideas amongst the interagency working group, which was established in the president's first digital assets CEO, the president likes to say he has a lot of high IQ people in his cabinet, and I think he's certainly right about that. So we'll work with Commerce, we'll work with Treasury, Secretary Letnick, Secretary Besson, to find these creative solutions. But, I think that a public-private partnership between the miners could be a phenomenal way to accumulate Bitcoin for the reserve.
Well, we certainly look forward to being part of that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your service.
Thank you, Fred.
So as you can see, Bo Hines, Trump's executive director, talking very eloquently about the Bitcoin strategic reserve. I do think once we get confirmation that they've actually added to the reserve, because right now they just have those 190 or 200,000 coins from Silk Road and seizures. That's technically their strategic reserve, although I haven't heard them actually audit them and actually say that they have that going and started. But once they actually do it in that budget neutral way that he was referencing and add to that strategic reserve, you're going to see some price movement, because I think my personal opinion as a Bitcoiner, if this is really going to be a thing, if they're really going to do this strategic Bitcoin reserve, and the United States is actually going to dive into this and do it, I think you have some other countries that have already been accumulating and they're just waiting for the U.S. to announce. And once the U.S. announces, they'll announce. So I don't think that the U.S. is just going to do it and everybody's going to follow suit. I think other countries are already doing it. We've heard some UAE countries already, rumors of them accumulating, and some doing it through the ETFs and stuff like that. But I think it'll be a very quick avalanche, and you'll see the price move when that happens. And then it'll be very hard to accumulate Bitcoin at these low prices. And I know it's weird to say low prices at 110,000, but when Bitcoin was 20,000 and people thought that was a lot, think of how low 20,000 is now compared to where we're at 100. So if Bitcoin gets up to 250,000 or 300 or 400,000, think of how low 100,000 will sound at those levels. So it's interesting to see that the government, somebody in Trump's administration, in the president's administration, referencing crypto and Bitcoin and talking about the Stablecoin Legislation Act. Here's a good little tweet here from Elon Trades. If you can remain delusionally bullish longer than the market can remain bearish, you win. That's kind of how the getting through bear markets are with Bitcoin. Getting through a couple of these articles here. The IMF rejects Pakistan's proposal to mine Bitcoin with surplus energy. IMF is just fighting tooth and nail. They're like the Elizabeth Warrens of the central banks. They just want to stop countries, and you can't stop this train, as Lynn Alden says. They're gonna lose ultimately. Bitcoin balances on over-the-counter desks hits an all-time low. Supply shock incoming. So you have less and less Bitcoin out there available for people to get and buy, which means the scarcity model doing its thing. Last article here, the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF now generate, and this is BlackRock, the biggest assets under management in the world, now generates more income for BlackRock than its S&P 500 funds. If there's one thing I can rely on Wall Street to do, it's press its advantage. So we'll kind of end on that there. What do you think when you see that, Rich or Mike? I mean, BlackRock, the biggest assets under management in the world, now getting more income generating from its Bitcoin funds than its S&P 500 funds. The S&P 500 is a standard. That's the standard. When people say the market, they are talking about the S&P 500. BlackRock now generates more income from its Bitcoin ETFs than it does from its market standard funds.
Well, that's just proof it's a scam.
Yeah, that fake
big
digital internet
scheme,
money,
man.
right? The big fake digital internet money. All right, before we run out of here, Mike, is there anything you want to say before you jump out of here? Any last parting words for you before we end this podcast?
Well, I guess the one thing I need to do is start thinking a little more about the future and a little less about the next Bills game I'm attending.
You can just find the happy medium. And when it comes to like Bitcoin stacking, like we always say on this podcast, it doesn't matter if it's $10 a week, $100 a week, $1,000 a month, whatever the case may be, just buy a little bit at a time. I do, even now at where I'm at, I do $20 buys, I do $30 buys, I do $100 buys. It varies. But there's never too little of an amount that I can get and accumulate. I do my free stuff, and then when I get a little bit extra cash, I buy $20 here or $30 there. Like, I'm still continuously adding to my Bitcoin stack, because when somebody asks you how much Bitcoin you have, the only correct answer ever say to that question is not enough. As we always do, boys and girls, thank you for watching. Our socials are going at the bottom of the screen. Mike, if you want to give your socials to any of the viewers that are watching that have never seen you before, if you want to, how do they find you if they are interested in?
I'm on X at Epic Mikey C, I believe is the handle, and Facebook Michael Campana, and you can also find me dealing Wednesday through Sunday nights at Seneca Niagara Casino and Hotel.
Yeah, if you want to lose some money in your Niagara Falls, go find Mike at the tables, and he'll happily take your money for the casino. As always, boys and girls, happy 4th of July. Have a good holiday weekend if you're watching this live, and if you're watching this on the playback, be safe. Don't blow your hands off. Don't trust, verify. Peace.